Welcome to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success. I'm also excited to share my book, Straight from the Admissions Office, a review of my biggest takeaways from the first few hundred podcast episodes. It's packed with direct insights from admissions professionals and practical tips to help students and their families navigate the college admissions process. You can find all of the information in the show notes. Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you today, David duKor-Jackson, who's the Director of Admissions at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, fondly known as MIT. David, I'm so grateful that you're here today. I've been trying to get you on for a while. Welcome, and how are you?
I'm doing great, John, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about MIT today.
Well, it is our pleasure and honor. So let's start by asking David, what innovative or unique academic programs at MIT set the institution apart, and what qualities or indicators do you look for in applicants that reflect a true passion for all of these areas?
Well, it's a funny thing. I mean, we have outstanding academic programs across the curriculum. And so rather than focusing on any, single particular discipline, I want to highlight a program that's available to all of our undergraduates, regardless of what discipline they choose. And that's the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. So it's one of the first of its kind in the U.S. It began in 1969, so a year before I was born. And today it supports nearly 6,000 projects yearly, with 93% of our undergraduates participating in at least 1 year up during their undergraduate years. And the idea really is that our motto is mens et manus, mind and hand, and it's an opportunity for students to really to get their hands dirty right away and to engage with faculty and with their discipline to develop professional networks and get ready for what work is going to be like on the other side of their MIT education.
Well, I wasn't familiar with the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program, and wow, 6,000 projects yearly. Obviously, MIT is known for your STEM programs, including, but not limited to, ComSci, chemical, mechanical, and biological engineering, not to mention economics and physics. And by the way, David, I read recently that your retention rate is 98%, which is truly astonishing. It talks about the amazing campus culture. And speaking of that, can you describe MIT's campus culture and student life and explain how the university supports students in balancing rigorous academics with all of those extracurricular opportunities?
So MIT, it's one of the things that it's the kind of a challenge because people have perceptions of what MIT is, and at our foundational level, we are a university. And a university with a full range of offerings with students with a variety of passions and interests. And so they're interested in the arts, and they're interested in music, and they're interested, obviously in science and in athletics, and so there's a full, range and gamut of opportunities. But I would say in terms of how MIT supports students engaging in those things, there are a variety of support programs that really enable students to pursue anything that they want. And it starts even in the first semester, where the way that things are graded is on a pass, no record basis. And what that means essentially is that, students, they come in, they're very well prepared, but they want to try everything. They feel like, they're a kid in a candy store with all the offerings, that are available. And so in that first semester, the courses are all, kind of pass or not pass. And I don't want to say pass fail, because ultimately, like if you were to earn a grade of C or better, something that would, get you credit, you will pass that class. And if you were to earn a grade of less than a C, there would be no record that you ever took that course, that would appear on your transcript. And it, gives students the opportunity to come in to kind of see, where they're at, what level they're at, and kind of to test their mettle, as it were, against the curricula, and then move on from there. And in the second semester, it switches to ABC, no record. And so, they can go through that entire first year, kind of try everything, figure out where they are, and then move on from there, with a solid academic foundation. And, if students aren't successful, we have a variety of support programs to help them out. But I would say that, is kind of the core of giving students the opportunity to really try things.
I appreciate in the beginning you talked about the fact that people have perceptions of what MIT is. And I'd like to dig a little bit, if we can, regarding your mission and values. So, David, can you share MIT's core mission and values, and how important is it for students to incorporate these into their college applications?
That's a great question. So, in short, our mission is to use our collective energy and intellect to solve the world's biggest problems. So ultimately, we want our students and our community to work towards solutions that are going to make the world a better place. And as it relates to our admission selection process, mission alignment is a critical component, of what we're looking for. And so there can be students who are very well qualified, who ultimately we're just not going to be that interested in. And the example that I like to use is that in addition to the STEM programs that you mentioned, we also have an excellent school of business, the Sloan School of Management, and I would say with business or with management, oftentimes, students who are interested in a business education want to develop a product or service that's going to generate personal wealth, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I have no interest in those students whatsoever. Now, if they wanted to develop a product or service that was going to make the world a better place, to solve, big problems, and in the process generate personal wealth, that's something that I could get behind. But it's a difference of what you want to do, with that education, that is, so important to us.
Yeah, and I appreciate you talking about how your mission is around using our collective energy and intellect to solve the world's problems. And remember that, students, because when you're filling out the application, it really is important to get to the core of the mission, the values of the institution, so that you can hopefully express, first of all, that you understand it, but also talk about what you've done in high school that is in line with it, and frankly, what you plan on doing once you're on their campus. Now, David, MIT is renowned for its interdisciplinary approach. How important is it for applicants to demonstrate cross-disciplinary interest, and what guidance do you have for students with diverse academic passions?
Well, I will say that we have certainly seen an increase in the number of prospective students that are interested in solving problems that draw on multiple disciplines, and that typically necessitates that students collaborate with others cross-disciplinarily and develop a foundational understanding in a number of different areas. But as it relates to applicants, it's not necessary for them to have done that. And so we just want them to, pursue the things that are of genuine interest to them, and then tell us what they're passionate about, and we'll make an assessment from there. And I would say, speaking specifically to students with diverse academic passions, as you've said, I would say they should pursue them all. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and the piece there is that certainly it makes sense for students to be judicious with their time, and I recognize that people can't do everything, and so students do need to make choices, but for things that you're genuinely interested in, why wouldn't you do that?
Well, thank you so much, David. Of course, we appreciate that. And obviously, one of the most important things for the students and their families that are listening are your holistic review process. They want to hear everything about it. So, can you walk us through MIT's holistic review process and explain the relative importance of each part of the application, such as, of course, grades, essays, recommendations, extracurriculars, and anything else that you want to share with us, David?
John, I don't think anybody's interested in that.
Yeah, right.
um, well, again, thank you for asking. It's a great question, and as I think about our review, I think about the fact that I have been at a number of institutions, and at MIT, the process is the most meritocratic process that I have ever been a part of. And in terms of the review, ultimately, what we're trying to assess, is, whether someone is, certainly one, academically prepared. Do they have the appropriate academic foundation to come in and do the work? Are they a good match, for the institution, a good mission match, a good cultural match? And are they going to use their MIT education in a way that is going to bring more good, into the world? And so, as we, start, with applications, we're going to look at uh, a student's curriculum. That's always a good starting point. Start with the transcript, and we're looking at, what have students taken, over the course of their high school career. Have they challenged themselves in uh, in math and science, in terms of, and taken advantage, of the opportunities, that the school provides, and and frankly, we expect that students are going to challenge themselves, as much as they can, to take advantage of those opportunities, because we feel that, students who have taken advantage of all the opportunities in their high school are likely to come into MIT and take advantage of the opportunities on campus. And students who are not taking advantage of the opportunities at their high school are unlikely to come in and take advantage of all the opportunities at MIT. And so looking at the specific courses that students have taken, that's a starting point. Have they taken AP, honors, IB, all of those things. And then we're, certainly looking at their grades. And we typically, a question that gets asked is, do students have to have all A's? Well, I mean, you don't have to have all A's, but it's better if you do. And actually, one of the favorite questions that I've been asked is, would you rather see someone get all A's, in regular courses, or a B in an honors course or an AP course? And I would rather them get an A in an AP course,
Right,
And so there's no
right.
reason why somebody taking a more rigorous course, shouldn't perform. Uh, and so, but so we do want students to perform well in a rigorous curricula. And then as it relates to essays, again, we just want students to be authentic, to give us a sense of, who they are, and, kind of what their journey has been. We would like to have a better kind of understanding of who they are. Um, and and then in terms of recommendations, and I know, I'll probably dig into this a little bit more, but uh, what do the people in your community say about you? The people who can speak to those things. That's critical. Uh, and then as it relates to extracurriculars, it's not necessary to do everything. It's, again, going back to, pursuing your passions. It's important to do things that are meaningful to you. And so anything that somebody does, they should be able to tell us why they do it. And again, that doesn't mean that somebody needs to found a club, or to create a nonprofit, which, people like to do those things. And it could be that, the most significant thing that somebody's doing, is working because they need to help support their family. And so what students do, is to some degree less important than why they do it. And so all of those things are things we take into account when evaluating students.
Well, I think you made so many great points. First of all, indicating why you're doing something. So, as you put it, if you're working because you need to help the family, that's something, students, that you must make very clear. Otherwise, you're leaving it up to the admissions professionals to speculate as to why you might not be as active in your high school in terms of the extracurricular activities. Obviously, with the academics, you talked about wanting the rigor. You spoke clearly about, yes, it's preferable to have that A in an AP course as an example, and MIT is obviously very competitive. But what I want to talk about are a couple of things that you mentioned that perhaps people didn't quite understand. And you talked specifically about the question, are they a good match? When you're reviewing applications, you ask the question, is the student a good match? You pointed to your mission in terms of being a good match related to your mission. You also asked the question, are they going to use their MIT education to do good for the world? So again, this points back to the mission which you talked earlier about, which said to use our collective energy and intellect to somehow help solve the world's problems. And I mention all of that because I would imagine that if students can demonstrate their understanding of all of this, perhaps in their supplementals, if they're able to express what they've done in high school that is in line with your mission, what they plan to do, not only once they're on your campus, but beyond, that would help them. And so the supplemental, in my opinion, is probably a good area to indicate this. So David, what is it that you are looking for in the supplemental essays that isn't easily captured in other parts of the application? And how can students best showcase these unique qualities?
So the one clarification that I would make is that we're not on the common application. And so we don't get the big essay. Basically, the only essays that we have are what would typically be considered the supplemental ones. They are the ones that give us just a little bit more information about the things that are most salient for us. And I'll just quickly run through what those questions are. And they're nothing super complicated, but just a couple of questions. What field of study, interests you or appeals to you right now? And then tell us more about why that field of study at MIT appeals to you. You would be amazed at how many people whiff on that question.
Hmm.
And then another question, we know you live a busy life. Lots of things that you do that are required of you. Tell us something that you do simply for the pleasure of it. So again, not super complex. We just, want to get a sense of like when you can choose, what do you do? Because we want to get a sense of, who these kids are. And lots of students will tell us, oh, I do math for fun. Maybe. Maybe you do math for fun. But don't tell me that because you think that's what I want to hear. I want to hear what you actually do. What is the thing that helps you to, to relax. But again, some genuinely, I don't want to discourage people. Some genuinely do math for fun. Um, um, and it's a longer one. While some people reach their goals following well-trodden paths, others blaze their own trails, achieving the unexpected. In what ways have you done something different than what was expected in your educational journey? And I'll talk more about that one, and I'll just read these other ones. MIT brings people with diverse backgrounds together to collaborate, from tackling the world's biggest challenges to lending a helping hand. Describe one way you've collaborated with others to learn from them, with them, or to contribute to your community together. And then the last one is, how did you manage a situation or challenge you didn't expect? What did you learn from it? So those are the questions that we ask. And again, I don't think there's anything particularly earth-shattering in any of them, but they do, point back, to match. One question specifically is, what have you done with the opportunities? Because, there are lots of students who produce a portfolio of experiences that is impressive. There's a term that I have used. I didn't invent it, but it's a term that I use: paint by number. Where they have this idea of what the perfect MIT applicant is going to look like, and so they try to assemble a set of experiences that create this image, and it looks impressive on paper. But again, if we start kind of scratching the surface and why did you do this, and they don't have good answers for that. That suggests that, they weren't driven by their own passions. They were driven because, they thought this is what they, should do in order, to impress us. And typically if the why isn't there, it is less impressive. But then, the next question I talked about, it really talks about, collaboration. And at MIT, certainly we do expect, students to be very talented. But when they go out into the world, they're going to work with other people. They're going to work in teams, and collaboration is one of the things that we try to encourage students, during their time on campus. And I probably haven't talked enough about collaboration, and I'll go back to kind of one example, which is that at most high schools, students, they have their work, they're assigned the work, they turn things in, but and we have homework too, although we have special names for everything, and things, the typical assignment that students are going to have is what we call a problem set, and usually they are kind of indexed so that they're not impossible, but they might be difficult for somebody to do on their own, and that's intentional, because we don't necessarily want students working on their own. We want them working, on a team, and learning to work on a team is again part of the experience of being at MIT. And so when somebody turns in a problem set, they need to identify, all the people, that were in that group. And so we're trying to encourage and cultivate, that collaboration. And I think that is in stark contrast to one of those preconceptions that people have about MIT, that it's this very competitive place. Certainly, people like to do good things, but they are working together, to do those things. And so, we're looking for people who have a collaborative bent, towards them, and who recognize that they can learn from as well as teach, others. And so that's part of the way our community works. And then that last question, managing a challenge that you didn't expect. That's one. It's kind of funny because students will spend a lot of time talking about how some situation went catastrophically wrong, and they missed out on kind of the most important piece, which is, what did you learn from it? Like, how did you manage it? What did you learn from it? Because ultimately, we know that students are going to face many difficult challenges, many situations that don't go the way that they want them to. And the fact that somebody's going to face that, that's not necessarily extraordinary. But someone who can pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and then use what they learned to go do better the next time. So those are things that we value a great deal.
Well, that's awesome. And I appreciate you talking about a student describing a difficult situation, but then they forget to add, what did you learn from it? What was the point? What was your why in terms of whatever the situation is? I love how you emphasize that MIT is, in fact, a collaborative team approach, and you don't want to create an application writing only what you think the admissions office wants to hear. Because frankly, students, if you sound like every other student that's applying to MIT, you're probably not going to stand out. Would you agree with that, David?
I would agree with that 100%.
I appreciate it. And with test optional policies gaining a lot of traction, David, how does MIT view standardized test scores within an applicant's overall profile?
Well, I will say that we require testing. And we require testing because our research shows that standardized test performance is predictive of success at MIT. And the other piece for us is that standardized tests have also enabled us to identify and admit students who don't necessarily have access to a wide range of enrichment opportunities or the most advanced coursework, but who nonetheless demonstrate the academic proficiency that gives us a confidence that they can be successful. And so we do. So we respect the value of tests. We do appreciate them, but they still are only a single component of our evaluation. So it's just part of the puzzle.
Well, I appreciate how you talked about the fact that it also helps to level the playing field. You have students that come from high schools with 20 plus AP programs, some that don't have any, some only have 5. And so, yeah, it's one indicator, it's one data point that is important to help a competitive school like MIT really see the differences between the thousands of students that certainly apply. So, David, how do you evaluate letters of recommendation? And what advice do you offer students and even recommenders to ensure these letters enhance an overall application?
So it's funny, I spent a little bit of time as a college counselor, and when I say a little bit of time, I mean 8 years, uh, between my time at MIT. And so I've written plenty of recommendations in addition to the many that I have read. Um, and in a lot of cases, recommendations are neutral. And they're neutral because they're supposed to be affirming. They're supposed to be positive, and they've done their job, to do that. Uh, and in terms of students, choosing recommenders, it's important to choose recommenders carefully, obviously, um, prioritizing teachers who can speak to a student's strengths in the classroom. That at least for MIT, that's what we're looking for: people who can speak, to their strengths. And we specifically, while we don't require it, we we do require two recommendations, and we prefer one from a STEM recommender and one from a non-STEM recommender. And part of that is that those two are likely to say different things. They're going to give us different perspectives. But if somebody gives us a physics and a calculus, they're both probably going to speak about problem solving, which is useful, but you've duplicated it, we're getting the same message, and there's some additional insight that we could have gotten that we didn't get. Now, I will say that, some students might send us an English and a history. Again, we're going to get the same things. We really do want the problem solving, though, so we would prefer to have a STEM one. But I would say, do get a variety. Do get teachers that are going to be able to speak to different dimensions of a student's background. But students certainly should choose people who know them well and can speak to them. And I would also say for recommenders, maybe students can say this to their recommenders, or maybe recommenders are listening, I'm not sure. But I don't want a rehash of a student's resume. I want teachers to talk about, how they know students, the way that they contribute, in the classroom. That's the information that's most useful to us. That's the information that is unique, that a teacher has that they can share with us.
Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process. Well, we appreciate you talking about how you prefer a variety. For example, one teacher who's a STEM teacher, one non-STEM teacher. So we get the variety. And I also appreciate you talking about how teachers can speak to the students' strengths in the classroom as opposed to just repeating what's easily found on a transcript or an activity sheet. One of the best examples that I heard a rep talking about in admissions was that when a teacher wrote about a student, he or she spoke about how when they did their lesson plans, they needed to take this particular student into consideration in terms of the follow-up questions that surely the student would ask that were of higher order thinking. And so the teacher wrote about how when they are lesson planning, they're considering this student, which is amazing, right? So it's really a lesson for the recommenders, because I know there are a lot of teachers and guidance counselors that listen in on the podcast. You don't want to just repeat, right, what's easily found in other parts of the application. It's important to be mindful that the application has many parts. Each part has a distinct purpose. They have to complement each other and, frankly, build upon the next. So again, if you're repeating what's on a transcript or an activity sheet, you're not really adding overall value to the process. Now, David, what are some other common mistakes you see in college applications, and what practical tips would you offer students to avoid them?
So I have seen my share of mistakes. One I've already mentioned. But it's MIT. We have some admissions blogs that have been running for 20 years, and I actually wrote a blog about this very thing titled "You're Doing It Wrong." and I highlighted a handful of things. The first one was failure to follow directions. I mean, I know it is something that teachers stress all the time, um, but it is a kind of a fairly basic thing. We ask you to do a certain set of things. Please do those things. It is so simple when you just follow what we ask you to do. A second thing is providing incomplete information. And so on our application, the area where it's most common is we ask students to list out, the courses that they took in high school. And they're thinking, I'm providing a transcript, but they don't know the variety of transcripts that we see. And so, it's useful to us to have all of the grades and courses, delivered in a kind of a consistent way so that we can, quickly, kind of scan a student's record and know what they've taken. And so students will often just not complete that or leave off their senior classes, and so not providing complete information. Thinking specifically about the essays, overused metaphors, cliches, and responses devoid of thoughtful reflection. And we used to ask a question that asked about a student's background, and I can't tell you how many different times that that someone provided a recipe. And it was almost as if they found, either they thought, oh, this is going to be a creative way to introduce this, or they found something online that said, oh, try this. It wasn't nearly as creative as people thought it was. And then one that I have seen less frequently, but still seen it nonetheless, critiquing the application and or the process within the application. I'm not sure why somebody would do that, but it happens. And then I think actually the biggest one for us is sending lots of extra material, and I students really they want to put their best foot forward, and they want to provide as much information as possible. And there's a limited amount of things that applications ask for, but applications typically ask for the things that the admissions office, is going to use, the things that they that help them to understand who's a good fit for their community. And so more often than not, all that extra stuff does not help to provide any clarity about who those students are or why they're a good match. And frequently what it does is it kind of buries the things that the office was looking for, in all this extra information that just makes it more difficult to find things. And so while technically the sending lots of extra stuff might fall under the category of failure to follow directions, it's one that, particularly for schools like mine and other places where they're getting, tens of thousands of applications, just one extra document, multiplied by 30,000 is a lot of extra stuff. And so those are just, if avoiding those things, and there are many other things we could get into, but avoiding those things, I think, would go a long way.
So students, more does not necessarily mean better in the admissions process. So definitely follow the directions of the admissions office. Now, David, you also mentioned your blog. I put the Office of Undergraduate Admissions in the show notes always. If you want to include that, just send it to me. And of course, we'll create a link and make it available to the students and their families. David, beyond managing the freshman class size, right? Every single institution has an institutional priority in terms of the number of freshmen they're looking to admit each year. So aside from that freshman class size, what key institutional priorities influence admissions decisions at MIT?
I hate to sound like a broken record, but really serving the mission is what drives our admission decisions. And so certainly there is a practical component that is we want a class size of a particular and we're interested in composition, and we're interested in diversity along a variety of dimensions, because we feel like diversity is a more diverse community is going to enhance the learning that happens. And so all of those things kind of play into it. But ultimately, it is, what is the way that we can pull together a first-year class that serves the mission of the institution.
So, students, you heard it here again, serving the mission, right? Instead of trying to sound like everyone else, because most people probably neglect to take the time to look at the mission, the values, the core beliefs of the institution, and then demonstrate what you've done in high school that is in line with that, demonstrate how you understand it, how you're going to contribute, not only during your time at MIT, but beyond. What are you going to do, as David said much earlier? What are you going to do with your MIT education? So if you could understand those core values, which are all under the umbrella of the MIT mission, I think you will put yourself in a better situation with your overall application. Never any guarantees that anyone's going to be admitted, but understanding these core values, I think, is extremely important. Now, how is MIT, David, leveraging this thing we call artificial intelligence to manage and evaluate the tens of thousands of applications each year? And what should applicants know about this technology's impact on the overall process?
So it's funny that you ask that, um, primarily because the admission, or at least the undergraduate admission process, the process for which I'm responsible at MIT, relies entirely on human intelligence. And so we're not afraid of artificial intelligence. And I would say, I wouldn't be surprised, that a time comes where we rely upon it more. But right now, we feel like our staff is better at identifying the candidates that we think are going to contribute and benefit most from an MIT education. And 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 the things that I think are important for students to know is that, one, artificial intelligence is here to stay. Uh, and 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 its prominence is only going to grow, as time goes on. Um, and is someone are we going to hold it against somebody that is using AI in writing their application? Well, it's I kind of think of what a typical teacher would say. You're only cheating yourself,
Hmm.
because we're we're
Absolutely.
we're trying to figure out who students are, and if a student uses artificial intelligence to complete their application, entirely, they're depriving themselves of the opportunity to talk about who they are. That being said, there are pieces of it that are are in use all the time, and so I send texts on my phone. I use Google, or Google Docs, and I was surprised, when typing that it'll give me the next four words, and those are exactly the words that I was going to use because it's been reading everything that I write. It knows what I want to say, and it's helping me. And so there is that's being used right now, and that's fine. It helps you to do the things that you were already going to do. I think it becomes a problem when students completely outsource their work to AI, and so we're not at a stage where we're prepared to do that in our office. And so it is people that are still looking at every application, that are trying to get a sense of who somebody is, and as I said, who is going to most contribute to our community, but also who's going to most benefit from our community.
Well, I appreciate how you talk about the fact that MIT relies on human intelligence and that you have real people reviewing those applications because AI can do many things, but it doesn't take away that human element. Now, MIT places, as you've indicated, a strong emphasis on fostering an inclusive community. You talk so much about your collaborative and team approach. How does diversity and personal backgrounds factor into your admissions decisions, David?
Well, um, I mean, it is critically important to us, and again, it is tied back to our mission. Um, and as a community, we value diversity because we believe that students are going to learn more when surrounded by and engage with people who think differently, given their different backgrounds and experiences. And we really feel that better solutions are going to emerge when when a wider variety of perspectives um, are considered. And I think, we have seen plenty of cases, in the media, where when a variety of those experiences, weren't, when there are people that were missing from those conversations where technology missed, you know, and so anyway, we think, it's going to be better all the way. And within our admission process, we're concerned first and foremost with achievement. So that is always the starting point. What have students achieved? Because that's necessary to demonstrate readiness for the academic rigors of MIT. But that's also considered hand in hand with the achievement, or with the context in which that achievement is performed. Um, and when I say context, I basically just mean that everybody's situation is different. And and John, as you talked about, there's a range of different schools. And some schools have all the AP, and some schools don't have any. Um, and and for some students, they've achieved some height, but it's fairly typical within their environment. And for another student to achieve that same height, it's extraordinary given the resource and opportunities that they have at their disposal. And so that context is always something that we're going to consider. And then, of course, beyond that, again, another broken record, we're concerned with mission match.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that mission. And, you're clear that achievement is very important at MIT. Obviously, it's a rigorous application progress at your institution, but also you have that collaborative and team feel once students are on your campus, which is why you have that 98% retention rate, which is truly astonishing. So, David, looking ahead, how do you see the college admissions landscape evolving even further at MIT? And what other advice would you offer future applicants to stay adaptable and successful in this very difficult process for many?
Well, I would say, as it relates to the landscape, we will continue to make admission decisions in ways that are mission aligned, and that are in full compliance with all applicable laws. And so that's what we're going to continue to do. And as it relates to advice, a couple things. One, and it seems radical to say, but don't try to get admitted. Students should certainly apply, but they should, they should present their information in an authentic way, and do things because they want to do them, not because they think that that's what I want to see. And then one other, I think, important thing is that keep in mind that MIT is only one place that admits a relatively small fraction of the students who apply, but there are many, many excellent places, where students can go and find the transformative experience that they want in order to achieve their goals.
Well, we really appreciate that. David, you've given us so much today. Before I get to the last question, I always like to ask, is there a question that I didn't ask you today, or a topic that simply wasn't brought up that you'd like to share with our audience right now?
Sure. And I really appreciate this opportunity, because there are many, misconceptions that students have. And one of the ones that we always, kind of struggle, kind of breaking through is the idea that people feel like, well, I hope that I can get admitted, but if I get admitted, I still have to figure out whether or not I can afford it. And to that, I would say that we make admission decisions without regard, to a student or family's ability to pay, and we will meet 100% of their demonstrated need with financial aid. And this past year, we've enhanced our financial aid even further. So for families with an income under $100,000 a year with typical assets, they're going to pay nothing to attend MIT. So income under $100,000, they will pay nothing to attend MIT. again, assuming that they have typical assets. And then for families with an income under $200,000, MIT will be tuition free. And so from an affordability standpoint, there is no reason why anyone who's interested in the kind of education that one can have at MIT shouldn't apply.
Well, we really appreciate that. And we always remind students and their families to use the net price calculator. You could simply search MIT net price calculator. And the more honest you are with filling out that net price calculator, the better indicator you will get in terms of what you will actually pay. But I love how you broke down for families that make under $100,000 and then for those families making under $200,000. That's incredible that MIT meets 100% of the demonstrated need. David, this was awesome. You're awesome. It does lead us to the last question. What are your top 3 pieces of advice that you would provide students and their families getting ready for the college admissions process?
Well, I think I'm going to cheat a little bit. I might have more than 3 things.
That's fine. That's totally fine.
that I want to say. But so one particular piece of advice for parents, and this is going to be hard for parents, and I know this because I'm a parent. But the best advice that I can give to parents is to stay out of the way and allow their students to drive the process. Because the students are the ones who are going to have this collegiate experience. And that's not to say that you just leave them on their own, but there are things that they're going to figure out, as they're going through it. And even as I think about, the trips that families make, where they drive out, 4 hours to a campus and they get there and the kid says, no, this isn't it. And you're like, but you haven't even gotten out of the car. Yeah, this isn't it. You need to kind of trust them that, whatever it is that they're looking for, they didn't know what it was, but they determined that this isn't it. And so it is a process and they need to figure out, they don't know how to make this decision. But you need to give them, some agency so that they're able to make a decision that is appropriate for them. So they end up at a place that is going to meet, their needs. And so shifting from that, for students, focus on fit. So I talk a lot about match for MIT, but students should focus on the fit, of the institution. And I would say fit really in contrast to prestige, and so a lot of students are going to make a decision. They're going to try and make a decision based upon prestige, whether or not they're articulating it in that way. But they should be looking for an institution that is going to provide the kind of experience that's going to help them to get to where they want to go. And that requires them to think about, who am I now? Who do I want to be? And what institution is going to help me to get from where I am to where I want to go? So that's good for students. As it relates to the application, and we talked a little bit about this, they should use the application, their responses on the application, to provide useful and meaningful information. And so oftentimes, and again, I think about my time as a college counselor, a student would bring me an essay and say, what do you think of this? And oftentimes I'd get it and read through it. It's well crafted. And I would say, well, this is very well written. They'd say, well, thank you. And I'd say, but it doesn't tell me anything about you. And so if you needed to submit an application today, you could submit this and it would fulfill, the requirement, but it's ultimately not done anything positive for you, and so you need to use it as an opportunity to reveal something about yourself so that, the reader knows more about you than before they started. And then the last thing, which is something that I've already said, don't try to get admitted. Be authentic, apply to places that you're interested in, certainly, but don't try and, wrap yourself into a pretzel to be, what it is you think that school wants you to be. Be who you are, and present who you are. And that's going to help you to find a place that appreciates the person, and student that you are.
Well, we really appreciate you, those tremendous pieces of advice. You've given so many throughout this whole conversation. I do want to repeat the advice to the students, and there was a lot there, but I appreciated how you said, students, look for fit, but not necessarily prestige, right? You want to ask yourself, who am I now? Who do I want to be? And which institution, and by the way, there's over 4,000 of them in the United States alone, ask yourself, which institution will best get me to where I want to be from where I am here and now? David, you're awesome. It's no wonder why you work at one of the best institutions in the entire world. We appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. And to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care all, and best wishes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the CAP.
Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.